Hi, Living It Out Writers, Team 4, here we are, and we are writing for the week of November 30th, so after Thanksgiving, and I just want to thank you so much for serving early. I know that it is Sunday, and this is pretty unusual for us to be doing it this early, but I'm just so grateful to have you. Just a few reminders before I get into every day. I'm going to sort of look at the outline and remind myself of the notes that I wanted to give you. You are the last team to sort of go through this video side of it, so you'll have to let me know if it's helpful or not, if I should keep it up. I think the other teams so far have sort of given me a resounding yes, but I would love your feedback and input on it. So a couple of reminders. The first is that the introductions can actually be a little bit longer than I think we initially thought. So we were sitting at 215 words before. You can really push it to about 250 words, particularly if you only have 4 or 5 verses in the scripture. So kind of sit around that 250. It can be a little bit less. Try not to go over it. And remember that the last paragraph of your intro needs to be context. So this plants the reader's feet in scripture, talks about what's happening beforehand. Remember the rings that we talked about at training that had sometimes the historical or sometimes the environmental. I think I just totally made that up, but one of the rings that talked about all of those things. And so go back to that visual if you're looking for some different ways to come into that scripture. And then I've included some links to resources. Please use those. They're really not optional anymore because of how narrow our focus is each day. Remember, narrow means deeper. So use those resources. And a reminder on believe. This needs to be a teaching question that comes right out of scripture. So circle this, multiple choice, put them back into scripture and having to not just fill in the blank necessarily, but that can be one of the techniques, but you really want them to think about, what do these verses want me to believe? What is Jesus teaching us? What is God telling me here that then leads to a live question? If I believe this, then, and that's what your first live question can be, this is how it then changes the way that I do things, the way I live, and the way that I look at the world. So again, use your big point as a guide, and you can certainly also use that big point in your intro. Sometimes it's okay to repeat it. I've noticed that sometimes I think we're sort of avoiding the big point, but I'm not always sure that they're reading it. So don't hesitate to, if it helps you transition, to use it again. And then this is probably my biggest point, is watch out for the easy live trap of just, especially this week, what am I thankful for? Because everybody could ask that question Monday through Friday. So the idea is that we have to really look at the big point, look at the verses. We really are only going to ask that question on Monday and kind of on Friday. But that's not the question that you want to ask. You want to go back to the big point and really drive them then into, what does it look like to live that out if I believe it? Okay, so on to the days. Monday, I'm going to go ahead and take Monday since it's sort of a recap of the weekend, and we've got 4 writers this week. So look over that content so you know where I'm going. But then let's look at Tuesday. It's called Walking by Faith to the Goal. And this is really about forward motion, taking steps. In order to get to God's blessings, we need to start walking in faith. And you'll notice that you get to use a really cool story of the lepers. And I gave you Barb's fill-in for that weekend too, or this weekend too, excuse me. So there's a lot here, but the reason I did that is because I want you to use that hook of sort of the forward motion and physics, and then get into more of the details of her talk. And again, use that context paragraph to talk about leprosy, to review that, and unpack that a little bit there. You'll notice I included a link there for you. Okay, so then Wednesday is unfair plus uncertain plus unselfish equals content. And so this is really the day about contentment, having a full life, what that looks like. You'll notice that there's sort of a compare and contrast between content and covetous. Is that how you say that word? I'd have to check it. So look at those two words as a way to come into that as well. And I included a note here too about the context. This Philippians 4:13 is super familiar to most of us who've been in the Bible for a while. Through all things, or I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. So be sure and not necessarily land there right away, but really to get that scripture to come alive, talk about a different portion of it. I gave you the verses beforehand to be able to do that so that you can go there and live, but it doesn't have to be the first place that you go. You can kind of build up to it. Thursday is about abundance. You'll notice that there's a visual here of sort of the difference between abundance and scarcity. I'm having trouble today. It's Sunday. So go ahead and, again, look at the compare and contrast. Really, Barb is doing a lot of that through her talk of what it looks like and what it doesn't look like. So you can do that again here on Thursday. The other thing is that a little bit of this language feels a little feminine to me. So let's be careful about that and make sure that we really make it so that it's gender neutral throughout here. Your verses come back to a set that come from the Old Testament that talk about lepers and their abundance mindset, and it's an awesome set of scripture, so I'm anxious for you to have some fun with that. And then on Friday is really how do we be more grateful? We say it, but what are the ways that we can do that? And it's stop, look, and go. And so you'll notice that I included a few things here of how you could get there. I gave you some pretty direct notes from Barb's talk, but I want you to put it into your own words. So don't rely on just those sentences there, but look at how you can come into that in your own way. I included just some suggestions here about you could unpack it first and then give some examples. You could use bullet points with 1 or 2 sentences to review and then give an example of what that can look like. But be sure and think about how this works in everyday life so that you can, again, make that come alive. You are going to come back into Philippians 4. So for the person who is writing Wednesday and Philippians, I really want you to talk about how Paul comes into these verses, all the things that have happened to him. But for the person who's writing Friday, you're actually backing up a few verses and talking about how we want to fix our thoughts on what's true and honorable and right and pure. And so I want you to stay away from what Paul has gone through and really focus more on his actual teaching here. So again, use those rings, come into it a different way on Friday so that we don't have 2 contexts that are nearly the same. All right, I think that's it. This was a little longer than I meant it to be. Text me if you have questions, call. I will be around this afternoon, and I'll probably write Monday tonight so that it's done. And remember that we are making our goal as 11 o'clock. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to get those submissions in. So thank you so much for serving, and I will see you soon.